What's going on, everybody? It is Monday, September 19th, and this is the College Football Daily. I'm your host, Nick Kosko, as always, on this Monday to kick off another college football week. We have to look back at what Saturday brought us in week 3 of the sport as the USC Trojans made another big statement with a huge win over Fresno State, now 3-0 on the season, and they remained in the top 10 of the latest AP Top 25, coming in at number 7. So Lincoln Riley's crew off to another great start here in 2022. His first year at the helm with the Trojans. And to help me break them down today is going to be Ryan Abraham of USCFootball.com. So let's bring him in right now. Ryan, thanks for joining me, man. And, I'm looking at USC and I'm thinking to myself, this should have been a bit of a longer process. But, it's Lincoln Riley, first year, brings all these transfers in. Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback. I mean, everything is just breaking right now for USC in the Pac-12.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you think about where USC was a year ago, just fresh off of firing Clay Helton after losing to Stanford, and then they come out of the gate 3-0, scoring at least 40 points in every game. They haven't done that since the Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush days back in 2005. So we weren't sure how long it was going to take to sort of transform this roster and the staff and the culture and everything. But Lincoln Riley in the last, 8-9 months has been able to do that. And the fact that they're going out and just beating all these teams by double digits, covering the spread every week, haven't turned the ball over all year. They forced, 10 turnovers. It's just been kind of a crazy transformation from what we saw last year to this year.
Do you consider it a bit of luck at this point, considering, again, it's only 3 games. We don't want to overreact about which way or the other, but I'm looking at this team, and it's a brand new football team, brand new staff under Riley. He brought in all these transfers, and usually for a team like that, especially at the college level, it takes time for these guys to gel. So I'm not necessarily surprised that they are 3-0 right now, but maybe just how easy it is right now. What do you say?
I think, Lincoln Riley had a plan in place, and I think he looked at the roster and said, we got to transform this. And they added superstars on the offensive side of the ball and some solid players on the defensive side of the ball. They did whatever they could. And I asked him about it and what would be, are you ahead of schedule or anything? He's like, culture wise, he didn't know if everyone would have been bought in already, but they have. I think there's some luck factor on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they had 3 pick sixes in the first week, but to get 10 turnovers on the year, they're forcing a lot of negative plays. I think 26 tackles for loss, 14 sacks on the season, along with those 10 turnovers, but they're giving up a lot of yards too. So they're getting some opportunistic stops in the red zone. On the offensive side, I don't think there's a lot of luck involved. You saw Caleb Williams on Saturday. Wasn't his best game as a Trojan for sure, but it's sort of like your golf game. Like he was driving the ball really well, but he wasn't driving the ball that well on Saturday, but he was rolling in putts from far out. So it's just one of those things where the first, 2 weeks ago against Stanford, they go 5 straight touchdowns without having a third down. And then, on Saturday against Fresno State, they had to convert a bunch of third downs and even some 3 fourth downs. So they're kind of doing it different ways. So I would say on the offensive side, there's a lot of skill involved there. They can win. They can beat you a whole bunch of different ways. They're scoring a lot of points no matter what happens in the game. So I wouldn't attribute that to luck very much.
I'll circle back to the offense in just a second. So you mentioned the defense. I mean, who has really stood out to you among these first 3 weeks? Because I would say that's probably the biggest question everyone had, aside from, how all these new faces obviously gel together here in 2022. But everyone must have said, you know what? Lincoln Riley, we know he's a quarterback guru. He's an offensive genius, but that defense could be what holds USC back in their hopes for a Pac-12 title in his first year as head coach. But it just seems like now they're answering those questions as well. And I mentioned the luck factor before, but is a little bit more than that. I mean, you just mentioned before how they're more of an opportunistic type of defense.
Yeah, I think if you look at some holdovers, like Tuli Tuipulotu is potential All-American on the defensive line. He might have had 2 sacks on Saturday. And then Kalen Bullock, he's been great. He had a 93-yard pick 6 in the opener, but the USC safety, he's been awesome. But a lot of the guys that are contributing to transfers, like Shane Lee's a captain on this team, the middle linebacker that came over from Alabama. But Eric Gentry was a freshman All-American at Arizona State last year, 6'6", like 205 pounds. He doesn't look like a linebacker, and he has a tip pass on Saturday. He's been all over the place, having some big hits. Just been kind of crazy. And then Solomon Byrd, they get all these transfers in from big-time programs. He's a rush end from Wyoming, and he ends up getting 2 sacks against Stanford. He got another sack against Fresno State. So you're getting some good contributions from guys that were on the team from before, but a lot of the contributions on the defensive side are from these transfer players in. And a guy like Solomon Byrd was like 3rd on the depth chart. He wasn't really even getting reps. He's kind of worked his way up, and now he's a starter. So they kind of need to find some of those guys to come in and fill some roles, because they definitely had a lot of holes on the roster from last year. I mean, it was one of the worst defenses I've ever seen from USC last year. So they're a flawed defense for sure, but they're getting big plays at the right time and turning the ball over, and that's going to help any defense.
Yeah, it certainly has helped that Solomon Byrd has stepped up, as you just mentioned. So before I come over to the offense, because it has a Heisman contender in Caleb Williams, of course, but I'm just looking at this team as a whole right now. Can this be a sustainable model for what you've seen over the first 3 weeks? I mean, it seems like they're the most. I mean, they're the most team that's the most well off out of all the Pac-12 teams right now. We've seen an up and down Oregon team. Utah obviously already has a loss as well. Washington might not be as good as they put on against Michigan State, but maybe they are that good. UCLA, maybe some questions as well. So in the grand scheme of things, I mean, how are you rating this USC team within the confines of the Pac-12?
Yeah, I mean, the Pac-12 had some really good wins over the weekend. Oregon getting a win over a ranked BYU team, Washington really piling on a ranked Michigan State team. Those two teams USC isn't playing, though, so they don't have to worry about them, at least till the title game. Utah's turned things around after that opening loss to Florida. But the problem is, if you're going to face USC, they've scored on the first drive of every game. I think the first two drives of every game. It might have been three, I don't know. But I mean, they just keep scoring at the beginning of the game, and you're like, you look around, you're like, well, okay, now we're down 14 points. What happens? And I think you're taking teams out of what they want to do. Like a Stanford would love to get a lead and sort of milk it. USC put Stanford in a terrible spot because they were playing catch up the entire game. So I think with this offense, and we've seen them, like I mentioned, they've scored different ways. It could be fast, explosive plays, or it could be long, sustained drives where they had two running backs go for over 100 yards. Both played for Pac-12 teams last year, but neither one of them were USC, and Travis Dye and Austin Jones. But they can beat you a whole lot of different ways on offense. So I think they're going to have a puncher's chance at every game. That the defense has sort of been up and down. They've been a lot of bend but don't break. So I think they're the favorite in the Pac-12 right now, just because teams throughout college football outside of like maybe Georgia are flawed, and USC certainly has flaws. Lincoln Riley didn't fix everything coming in year one, but they're good enough that they can easily win the Pac-12 this year, which I thought, Utah would kind of be the class of the conference, but I didn't think USC would be as good as they've been. So they got to play Utah on the road. I think it's going to go through that game in Salt Lake City. But right now, the way USC is scoring points, I think they're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way out, and they're already 3-0. So that's going to tell you something.
We'll talk about one of those biggest keys to their success after this quick break. Keep it locked here. You're listening to the College Football Daily right here on 24/7 Sports. So, Ryan, this is my other question about what this USC offense is doing here. And, of course, Ryan Abraham of USCFootball.com joining me on the College Football Daily. Caleb Williams, everyone knew how good he was. I mean, he stood out at Oklahoma, takes over for Spencer Rattler. Now, he was mostly good, but then once Lincoln Riley leaves, naturally everyone's going to say, well, Caleb's going to follow him, and he did, and so far, so good. I mean, this kid has probably put himself right into the thick of the Heisman Trophy conversation. And again, he was a guy that didn't even play the whole year last year for Oklahoma. He's only played 3 games so far this year for USC. With him at the helm and just piloting this offense right now, you have a Heisman contender, and then you have arguably the best, or at least one of the best offenses in the country coming straight out from the West Coast.
Yeah, with Jordan Addison, the addition there, you get the Biletnikoff Award winner from last year. That certainly helps things. Mario Williams has been great for USC. He's so elusive out there. But I've been impressed with Caleb Williams just since he came in. He's done it like different ways through 3 games. That first game against Rice, now Rice is overmatched. He just kind of effortlessly took off and ran the ball. Had 68 rushing yards. And we were checking with sports information at USC. We couldn't find a quarterback at USC that ran for that many yards. And we went back to like the Rodney Peete days in the late 80s. And I don't think he did that. So this is, that was just something he just did like out of nowhere. And then the next week against Stanford, doesn't really want to run much. He's throwing the ball at a high percentage all over the place. And then, against Fresno State, he seemed a little rattled in the pocket. USC was down one of their offensive linemen, and he seemed to be maybe kind of rushing in his head a little bit. Wasn't the most accurate guy in the world like we've seen in years. He had more incomplete passes than he did before, but he took off and ran for a couple of touchdowns, converted on 3 fourth downs. And when it was money downs, when it was like 3rd and long, was really delivering the ball and finding receivers. So I've been impressed just because he's done it in different ways each week. So it's like on Saturday, you could say he kind of had an off game and still, it was still really good. They put up 45 points. So it's kind of one of those things where he's just been really impressive. You're not going to be, you don't bring your A game every day. And I think the fact that we saw them sort of have an off night and still was really effective at the quarterback spot, that was really impressive to me.
Would you put him at the top of your Heisman candidates right now, or at least in the thick of things?
Yeah, I think he's in the thick of things. I mean, it's, only 3 games in, and we're going to see, what Georgia's doing right now. I don't think anybody expected it, and we'll see. There's some prominent quarterbacks with, Bryce Young coming back and CJ Stroud and all those guys, but I think he's going to be in the conversation as long as USC keeps scoring 40 plus points a game. And if he doesn't throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns, he runs for a couple. It's just one of those things where he's been electric. And a guy like Jordan Addison, he has 5 touchdown catches through 3 games. He had another one that was called back because he was just out at the 1 or whatever. But it's one of those things where I think the numbers are going to keep piling up. And if they get a win this weekend against Oregon State, which is going to be 2 undefeated teams, tough game on the road, and then like we mentioned the Salt Lake City game, you get a win there. You get some of those big wins along with the numbers. There's no reason why. He's definitely on track to be in New York right now. Now things can change. It's a long season, but it's one of those things where, is he the perfect quarterback? No, but who is? And is he going to be up there with the guys that you've already seen that are good? And he's the way they're putting up numbers and points, and the way he's played and how poised he's been. I don't see why he wouldn't be up there in the top 3 or 4 for the Heisman.
Heck, you mentioned Georgia. Maybe the entire football team is going to be in New York by season's end with the way they're playing right now. So, speaking of Georgia, and it's not a direct comparison of USC to Georgia right now, but we talked about before how the Pac-12 it's an open conference, and it probably does go through Utah right now. But the way USC is playing, I mean, they very well could turn themselves into the favorites even before that game or after the game should they get a win. So then, if you have that on the table, the number 7 team in the country. And once you hear number 7, you're like, well, that's only 3 spots away from a college football playoff spot once the rankings come out later this season. So when I'm looking ahead, and I hate to look too far ahead because we're only a quarter way through the season, but in your mind, is this a USC team, year 1 under Lincoln Riley, that could actually say, you know what, we can win the Pac-12, 11-1, 12-0, and be in, or excuse me, 12-1 or 13-0, and be in the college football playoff by the end of the season?
Yeah, I didn't think so going into the season, but now just looking at the Pac-12, seeing that Utah's not been perfect. Now they started off slow yesterday or on Saturday and then piled it on, but against San Diego State. But it's a USC team that easily, I think, could win the Pac-12. There's landmines along the way, but they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. Like, people want Texas to be good or Florida State. People want USC to be good. They're willing to accept a great USC team. They see a team that, USC put up 50 points, like, okay, they're really good. We know they've been good before. They can be good again. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt. Where maybe like a Utah or an Oregon that were 12-1, maybe they wouldn't get the benefit of the doubt. So I think USC would. So if they can go through, I mean, like you said, maybe even losing to Utah in Salt Lake City, but then coming back and like beating the Utes in the Pac-12 championship game in Vegas, you're 12-1. I mean, things might have to fall their way a little bit, but I think more often than not, you're going to be in the college football playoff. I don't think they're a contender to win the national championship, but the way the path is, like, I could see them making the playoff, which is crazy considering that. Like, would they get beat badly by an Alabama or Georgia or something? Probably. But USC's never made the playoff before. I know USC fans are like, well, wouldn't you rather just go like 10-2 and win the Rose Bowl? And for me, no, man, you want to make the playoff. Like, if you can go from 4-8 to in the college football playoff in 1 year, even though you're probably not going to do well, in those games, man, I think that's what you would want to do and go out there. It's really proving the concept of what Lincoln Riley was selling. And I think it's going to help recruiting and all that, even if you get trucked by one of those SEC teams. But yeah, I think the path is there, which I didn't really believe going into the season. But the way they've played and the way that what's kind of things have unfolded in the Pac-12, I think it's really a possibility they could make it this year.
Boy, man, if they go from 4-8 to the college football playoff in just 1 year under Lincoln Riley, he might just get a lifetime contract right after 2022. Ryan Abraham with me on the College Football Daily. Ryan, where can everybody find you and your work on social media and online?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Inside Troy or on Instagram at The Peristyle. And then, of course, USCFootball.com. We've been doing this since 1996, if you can believe that. It was a lean 7 or 8 years, but now it looks like things are on the up and up a little bit. So if you want to follow, you hate USC, you love USC, you can definitely get whatever you need over at uscfootball.com.
Love them or hate them, best USC coverage around on uscfootball.com. Ryan Abraham with me on the College Football Daily. That's going to do it for us. I am Nick Kosko. Be sure to follow me on Twitter as well at Nick Kosko59. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe the College Football Daily on our 24/7 Sports YouTube page. And also, if you're listening wherever you might get your podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever the case may be. Once again, Nick Kosko saying so long. This has been the College Football Daily right here on 24/7 Sports.